All right. So with that, we can get started.
Hear me?
Yep, I can hear you.
Okay. All right. Somehow my headsets aren't working and the sound is coming through the computer thing, monitor.
Okay. Well, we'll try and see how we can make this work for this meeting. Hello, everyone. It's February 7th. We are just a few minutes after 7 o'clock, and it is the Economic Development Committee meeting. I believe for attendance, we're only missing George and John, unless I'm missing anyone else. Jan is going, our usual chair is attending via Zoom, and I will take over as the moderator for today. So we do have a quorum. Adjustments to the agenda. Are there any items on the agenda to either remove or add? Bob?
Just a short discussion about a potential moratorium or ordinance regarding aquaculture on the Potomac River.
So that would be under new business.
New business, yeah.
Unless someone has any objections. All right, so aquaculture will come in under new business. Any other items? Hearing none.
I'd like to add one.
Oh, sorry, Jen.
I'd like to just make an announcement of good news about WBA during new business, I guess.
Yeah, sure. That'll be C. Or yeah. WBA. All right, so for adjustments, we have aquaculture and the WBA. Anything else? Jen, I take it the hand's just staying up. But hearing none. Sorry. Hearing none, we'll move on to citizens' comments. There's no one in the audience. Moving on to minutes, January 3rd, 2023. Sorry that those minutes got out, I think on Monday, but were there any adjustments? Do people need more time to review them?
I haven't had time to read anything, so
Okay.
I'll sit out.
What about everyone else?
I was going to move acceptance, but if people need more time, that's fine with me.
Yeah, I just glanced at them. Everything looked okay to me, but if someone needs time to read them, that's fine.
I don't mind deferring if people would prefer that for just a month.
Doesn't matter to me.
I've read 'em, but that's fine.
All right.
Sounds like not everybody has.
So is there a motion to table?
So moved.
All right. All those in favor to table? And,
Oh, I guess I'll put my hand up. Hang on.
all right. No, that's all right.
Oh, okay.
You
Raise
you
hand.
said you said you want to table it, so I'm fine with that.
Okay.
All right. So chair report, or I guess in this case, it'll be the Jan report. What's
All
going
right,
on, Jen?
I've got, I don't have a whole lot. I did just get an update on, we had a food pantry. I didn't work it today, but we did have food pantry today. And I did get the numbers, so let me just pull those up here. So we had 140 households today. This is the Waldoboro Food Pantry, which serves Waldoboro, Bremen, and Noblesboro. We had new households, 6 total new households, 5 from Waldoboro, 1 from Bremen. We had 7 households from Bremen and 5 from Noblesboro, all the rest from Waldoboro. Total number of people receiving food today was 359. And interesting thing, 105 were children, 186 were adults, and 68 were seniors. And I would say that seems like a fairly typical distribution to me. And that's about all I have for the chair's report.
All right. Sorry, I'm just pulling this up in case there's comments. So if that's it for the chair report, we have the broadband report with Ruben.
So broadband, we've had a little action, which was nice last week or the week before. Time's getting weird for me. I went to the select board and asked for support for matching funds for our planning grant in the amount of $5,000. That was to work with LCI. Since then, nothing official has happened yet. We let LCI know that we got it okay. Max and I have been talking. We think it's a good idea to reach out to every other ISP one more time and make sure that no one else is interested. It feels fair. We don't have any signed contracts or agreements or anything. The only time LCI has come up is when I've mentioned it and when we've had some conversations. There's no problem with that ISP, but we want to make sure that with those planning grants available, that there is or is an interest from anyone else that might work in the area, especially as companies like TDS and Fidium are building all around the edge of Waldoboro. So all good things. Had a little email communication from a couple residents here and there, just asking generalized questions. Nothing really worth going into detail about, what's it going to cost compared to Fidium, things like that. And the answer has been, I have no idea. It's been 10 minutes. That's all I have for broadband.
Just a question to clarify that
Sure.
the match from the town would come from TIF
Okay.
money.
Yep.
And the money's there, so.
Yep.
Yep. Thanks.
Okay. Yeah, I'll just echo what Ruben said. Because I think TDS Telecom, for example, was something that we didn't really know was a player in the area, and they're expanding maybe into Manktown and other parts of Warren. So it probably makes sense to just check with them to see if they're doing any other areas or if they might be a potential provider instead.
Yeah, that's worth expanding on a little bit. TDS came out of nowhere, at least in my peripheral. If you drive through Warren, there's spools of fiber in their little depot area there, and they're building everywhere in Warren. They got grant money to replace their copper with fiber. It's a little odd because that includes the road I'm on. So if they set it up there, whoever has fiber first, I'm going to hook up to that.
Yeah,
I wasn't
that.
I wasn't part of expanding that out, but
Yeah.
I'm the broadband nerd. So that's why I thought I'd turn that off. You were such a good influence to get me to silence my phone, and it didn't happen. Anyway, so that was why I had the post up in the Waldoboro groups about, hey, anyone that lives on this road, click here. And then I shared the other ones about Fidium or about LCI.
That's good.
So it's interesting, and that will get some access out to people that don't have it. And there will be some residents in Waldoboro that could possibly benefit from that. And that's why we wanted to reach out to those other places again, because once a place already has trucks out and they're already doing the work, it changes the flow a little bit. So we're just asking who's interested.
And in terms of planning grants, the Connect Get Ready grant that was suggested by Evan Godowski from Wiscasset, that should be coming out in spring. So while we'll do the Island Institute grant, we can at least do this quick little research in case we could probably get it all funded through that grant instead. So
It's a stepping stone.
Sorry, the Get Ready grant is a planning grant, or is it
the
a
Get Ready from Maine Connect,
construction grant?
yeah, Get Ready from the Maine Connect Authority is a planning grant.
Okay.
So they have different categories for this. So we might be able to do Island Institute plus that one as well. So we don't have to use TIF money, and that would be great.
Okay.
Any other questions on broadband?
Just sorry, when I'm being a pain.
Yep.
Does
Please do.
TDS have any presence in Waldoboro at all?
No, they don't. The only place that's going to be an advantage, like on Manktown, if you're within 250 feet of the line, they'll hook you up because they're not
Wow.
doing any other construction. Which that number sounds impressive. That's the distance you need to be from the pole. If I get a running start from my front door, I can go from Waldoboro to Warren in about 8 seconds. It's just that road is the line in a lot of places.
I see why you're going to be.
Oh, I'm going to buy.
potentially-
He's gonna be
yeah,
I'm going
happy.
to buy the fastest speed they have just on
Yeah.
principle.
Yeah.
All right. Any other questions on broadband? Jen?
I'm jealous.
Yeah, it makes two of us, Jen.
All
I'll
right.
give you my Wi-Fi password.
All right. Well, if there's no other comments for broadband, we'll go on to town updates. Just quickly on the planning board. The gravel pit for Simon Road was approved. We had the 80 gray pre-application on January 26th, which I'm sure everyone's heard about at this point, whether they looked at it on social media or they read it in the newspaper. We have an FAQ that's on the town website that we've also mentioned in our Facebook page. I also included the link to the planning board meeting on the town website. So anyone who wants to know more about the meeting can watch it all uncut on YouTube, please. And for the meeting this week, there's a shoreland item for a residential house, but we're also going to have a pre-application for someone who wants to make a bed and breakfast and a wine bar at the Worcester House on Main Street. So that'll be an interesting meeting.
When is that?
That's going to be February 9th at 6 p.m. But the bread and breakfast pre-application probably isn't going to be until maybe 6:45 or later. And that's it for plant. Oh, still working on updating the ordinance. And then for grants, I'm applying for the Maine Outdoor Heritage Fund for a drone for the Menominee River to help identify some other sources of pollution. We're going forward with that. And I think the Shellfish Committee is going to be providing the match for that. And other departments as well are going to chip in. And then there's 2 grants, one with Maine Outdoor Heritage Fund, and then one with the the New England Mountain Biking Association, and that's to create some multi-use trails up at Quarry Hill. It's going to be in a more undeveloped area of it that just has snowmobile trails. I've already reached out to the snow crawlers, and Tony Lash at least has seemed very positive about it and welcomes the idea. Mid-Coast Conservancy's also been informed of this. They love the idea. And I'm looking forward to that project. I think it'll be a great addition to the site. And I'm wrapping up the Assistance to Firefighters grant this week because we would like to get a fire truck. And I don't know, I think that's it for grants at least. Oh, right, the tennis courts, because 80 grade came up and the tennis courts were brought up quite a bit. I'm trying to work with Doug back up at the state to try and really define our area up at 80 grade, because it used to just be the tennis courts, but they seem to have expanded that boundary to include the parking area. So I need to see from him. Yeah, it was weird. I need to see from him what we can do for options, because if the idea is to make recreation in those remaining parcels, then we could apply for a land water conservation grant to have that done. If not, the Sylvania committee is at least working on the capping so that that could address that conflict that we've had.
Yeah, the Sylvania committee has discussed the courts. So if you were to look at the Sylvania parcel where the building used to be, part of that capping could potentially be courts. So like a tennis court, basketball court, pickleball courts, maybe an open air pavilion over that, so that I use the idea that Marcus could then, teach yoga there, in an open air with a cover over it, which would be interesting. So there's a lot of potential there for development, and that's one of the big things. And they're also exploring the sale of the Hobson's house.
Neat.
All right. Are there any questions on the town updates?
Just one. If Volunteers of America is looking at maybe needing a little more room, and then we're considering taking the rest of the area and using it for some kind of recreation, what does that do to the easement that runs across to
Those back.
land that's now under conservation?
I don't see us going anywhere near that easement.
Okay. And the other thing, as far as town business goes, I just wanted to update you. The Shellfish Committee had an interesting speaker at their meeting the other night addressing concerns about aquaculture. And the concern from the Shellfish Committee is that DMR for water-based aquaculture believes that they are the last stand and that towns can't really regulate water-based aquaculture. We had a speaker that believes and presented some legal opinions that we actually could, to some degree, regulate what happens in our waters. The Shellfish Committee feels strongly that protecting the river and the wild species, be it clams, pogies, alewives, elvers, is extremely important, and that we take this very seriously because the 145 jobs from shellfishing, the probably 50 jobs from elvering, and the pogying, lobstering, and what goes on in the Madomic River are really important jobs to our community and the surrounding area. At the select board meeting next Tuesday, we're going to talk about that at a select board level. And the ask from the Shellfish Committee is to draft an ordinance that would regulate water-based aquaculture in the town of Waldeboro. Did I synopsize that well, Bob?
I was about to say, Bob, was this the item that you wanted to bring up?
Yes.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No,
I
it's
thought it
fine.
was under
Well, no.
council.
Yeah, no, I mean, unless anyone has any problem, that'll just be under town updates.
The only question I have is whether or not we'd want to consider putting the moratorium in as quickly as we can and then do the ordinance afterward. Because the ordinance could take longer.
Well, and I think that's part of what
something-
we're going to talk with our attorney
Okay.
about.
Okay.
If I may, I've got a question. How do you define aquaculture?
So two of the things that came up is oysters, oyster farms.
Okay,
Oysters are a competitor for food for clams. And the Shellfish Committee brought up that many of them used to clam in Damariscotta, in the Damariscotta River, and now there are no clams in the Damariscotta River. And they also brought up the chairperson of the Shellfish Committee in Damariscotta, who's a clammer, now clams here in town. And also fish farms. If you follow the
In
fish farm
Belfast,
discussion up in
Belfast.
across from Acadia, Belfast areas, large fish farms were proposed. A Boston Globe reporter, former Boston Globe reporter, did an article that really went in depth into the state of Maine, and there seems to be at a high level from economic development from the state of Maine that aquaculture is the answer to job creation. The problem is that wild seafood and wild fisheries also create jobs. So there's, jobs already here in Waldeboro and our surrounding area that are already in the river. But yet some of the sites that were suggested by the state, one was in Friendship, one was off of Bristol, one was off of, there's all these areas that they are interested in. And I think we have to pay very close attention. And I think the Shellfish Committee believes we have to pay close attention to what's going on. And that a lot of these decisions might be great for other areas of the state, but might not be great for Waldeboro.
okay. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Bob?
And one of the other things, if I could add, Julie, that both the journalist and the former employee of the DMR pointed out is that DMR seems to have taken on this mantle of leasing for aquaculture. And partly influenced by a good old boy network, or a network that seems to have been cultivated by them. They've gone out and solicited, indirectly or directly, people to come in.
Yes.
And it's not clear they really have the authority to do that. And then once you've done that, what obligations have you made that make it difficult to back down?
So for an example too, was they brought up Sarah Rademacher and the eel aquaculture based adventure up at the business park. The Shellfish Committee supported that.
Yeah.
But Sarah came to the Shellfish Committee, had a discussion, there's safeties in place. But it's a little bit different when you're talking about putting a competitor species in a wild river or a competitive species off of a wild river, where things can go wrong and things can happen. And we even talked about there's a diploid or a diploid or a diploid and a triploid oyster, and we would one of the things when we did have input to the DMR about one potential oyster farm was we don't want oysters that can reproduce. Also, a lot of times what the applicant might put down, and we experienced this with one application in particular, it doesn't interfere with the navigational waterway. Well, it actually did. And actually on the application, the applicant put, there is nobody further down the river than I am, so it's not interfering with any navigation. Yet we had somebody who works in this office who is an avid boater who uses that waterway, and there's just no way that it wouldn't impede with access. So it's just, there seems to be a disconnect between the state working with the local governments to figure out what's right for that area. And the DMR has taken a stance that, no, that's our ball of wax, and there is some legal standing that says it's not. So we want to have things in place that protect the river, because that really is not only from a standpoint of commercial for our livelihoods of our harvesters and our fishermen, it's also a huge recreational source for our community. Everybody loves the river, everybody loves to be on the river. So that would be it for my update.
I have a couple of questions.
Yeah.
Is there such a thing as an environmental impact study for an operation like that?
They do not require that.
Interesting.
Oh.
So
Good question.
if they don't require that, then there's no way to assess what negative impact they would have. So if the ecosystem is destroyed, if they do something, even if they say they won't do it, there's no recourse to correct or at least stop in any way.
So
Whatever
we
they
have
did.
2 upwellers. The
Yep.
town of Waldeboro through the Shellfish Committee have 2 upwellers in the
Right.
river. And what that is it's wild caught clams from the Potomac that we
Right.
put in an upweller. They spawn, they do a little dance,
Play some Barry White.
play some Barry White, and the seed just spreads all over the river. And that is the type of aquaculture that they're happy with.
That's a brilliant solution.
Yes, we're 2 years into it. So, but introducing species that are not here is what really concerns them. And there really is no environmental impact, because we've filled those applications out. And I'll be honest with you, it was our shellfish warden and I who filled out those applications. So there's no real environmental impact. But we've gotten smarter about it now, we know. But somebody might say, well, what's the harm of one? Well, the harm of one is when you figure out how many clam seeds spawn from our upweller, just think about how many oyster seed could spawn from an oyster operation if they're not the triploid oysters, which cannot reproduce.
And you're
So-
doing it with something that's already there.
Right.
If you were farming, pick a plant. If someone wanted to start a farm here with a foreign species, would there be any kind of similar?
Unless it's
thing?
on the prohibited species. Like you cannot plant a king crimson maple anymore in the state of Maine. It's on the outlawed list of trees.
I didn't know there were illegal.
There
trees.
are illegal trees in
Okay.
Maine, believe it or not. But I don't know, but I know oysters are, just because of the area, oysters are very prominent. And believe me, I'm not saying anything bad about Damascus oysters. They are wonderful. It's just Waldeboro's known where we are most years the #1 clam landing in the state of Maine. And I think that there's the Shellfish Committee that wants to keep it that way.
And I'm just trying to understand the impact. my angle is, when I ask questions like, when I make a comment like we're doing it with a native species, I take that as a positive. So that's the angle I'm looking at. And for all these other things, I can't think of a time when a foreign species has been introduced somewhere, like every time some state wants to bring wolves back, that it's gone really well. And that's what I'm comparing this
And,
to.
and it's hard because oysters were native to the area, but it's become, and we have to be, I think when aquaculture started out, it was really cool because it was, a bunch of local people getting together and finding their way. And you're introducing big business. When it comes to these fish farms, you're introducing very big business and big amounts of money.
Yep.
And we just have to be careful of that. And I think what our fisheries are going through right now, it's hard because we've been told this is the way to go. This is an economic gain. You're creating jobs. And once you say, oh, we're creating jobs, part of economic development just isn't creating jobs, it's preserving the jobs you already have.
Right.
And that's a thing that I think we have to concentrate on, is preserving these types of jobs.
Can we identify a success or a failure of a similar setup elsewhere in the state?
I think Damariscotta was the
I
example you
think
gave.
that if you were to ask the people who used to clam in the Damariscotta River, that would be, they would say the oysters have made it so that there are no clams in the Damariscotta River. I don't know what the scientific basis is, but we had a room full of clammers explaining they used to clam there and there are no more clams in the Damariscotta River.
Well, that's your front line right there.
That's, again, now is that a study by a scientist? No, but as we found out, a lot of times our guys are on the front lines.
Yeah.
They are, the scientists.
What if we get them to pair with a local school or something? That good science is validating information, right? They've done a lot of work.
Yeah, I don't know about that. They're really concerned right now just about the health of the river. And they've spent an inordinate amount of time making sure the river is the cleanest it's ever been. Absolutely the cleanest it's been. And they've done a really good job of that. And they really are stewards of the river.
Oh, no doubt. That last question was more of, do we need to back them up? Do they need bigger guns, for lack of a better term?
I just wanted you guys to be aware of it, and it was a good opportunity to make sure everybody knew about what was going to be discussed next Tuesday, and just make you aware of it, because it was a really good presentation. Bob was there, Jim Riesenbrock was there. It was a really good conversation. Like I said, it's a former employee of the DMR. It was her last name is Canny from the Protect Maine's Fishing Heritage. I'm getting that name wrong, I know. But it was a really good presentation.
So DMR, Protect Maine's Fishing here. Are there any other acronyms I should research between now and then?
And
Just type a few letters. You'll hit something.
Okay.
And does anybody else have any questions for me? Because I have to skedaddle.
No, all set, thanks.
Okay. Hi, Jan. Hi, Jen. Hi, Sonia. Goodbye.
Bye.
Bye,
Thanks, Julie.
Julie.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Thanks, Julie.
Bye.
I just wanted to say that Shellfish Committee meeting was one of the best meetings I've ever been to. It was that interesting. It was so good. And I learned more during that meeting than I had talking about clams or oysters ever before.
So from what Julie said, and is there any action you need from us, from the EDC tonight, or was this more of just an awareness?
I think this is an awareness thing, and it would be nice if people would, if you're interested, to go
to
to
the
the
next
meeting
select board
Tuesday
meeting.
night
Mhm.
and hear what they have to say.
Mhm.
Because I think there probably will be an ordinance, if not a moratorium,
Mhm.
coming out of this. Yeah. One of the interesting things they told me, and actually it was the reporter who reported it, DMR's issued all these leases. Not one single lease has become operative,
Interesting.
not one. They're all sitting there.
What's the job pay at the DMR? My gosh.
And it's land, it's area now that's been, if you will, privatized. but nobody's doing anything with it. So,
I think I did a little research on when you're setting up those oysters. There's a lot of permitting. It can cost up to $11 million to get set up. On that, you have to do federal permits, and they do have to do environmental studies on the flow of the river and the impact on that. I remember they did a tour, and it's that bio lab that's on the Dharmascotta River. I can't ever remember the name of it.
Darling Marine.
Yeah, something like that. It's a state thing, but a lot of the people who did the studies on producing were at the state of Maine, University of Maine, and a lot of them now have the permits on the Dharmascotta River. But I remember looking, there's only like usually 2 employees to 4 employees operating a oyster farm, and they take a lot of space. If you want to see what they do in South Thomaston on the Gig River, they're in above the bridge now, and they're down below the bridge. Okay, and it's like, I think when you're starting the seeds, it's like $250,000 to get a seed thing. But this was back in 2013, 14, 15 that I had this information. So it could be outdated, maybe cheaper. But I remember there was federal and state permits you had to get from the EPA, I think, on some stuff.
Well,
I can look it up for you if you want and stuff.
yeah, I think we'll still have a little time on this topic. Jen, your hand is up.
I was wondering if you guys can send us links of where to read some of the stuff that's happening.
one place you can go is to Protect Maine's Fishing Heritage Foundation. If you Google that, you'll find out a lot of the things they're trying to do.
Thank you.
Was the presentation recorded?
No, it wasn't. I asked that it be recorded and they didn't do it.
Well,
Should've
usually I'm usually not here for shellfish meetings. That's why it's probably not recorded.
No, I think they felt that a lot of the information being presented that night was sensitive. And they didn't want people to become misinformed. So, and besides, I don't think they record their meetings. It is a shellfish committee. They're self-funded.
Oh,
It's not tax money that funds them.
oh, I didn't even realize that.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, well, fair
That,
play.
that answers some questions then.
Thank you.
Well, are there any other questions on this topic? You didn't want us to do anything or?
No, I'm good.
Okay. And well, and I guess when we get under new business, this can be brought up again in case there's other last minute thoughts. But moving on to old business, since we got that time left, housing. And this was something that was requested to be tabled and discussed one more time at this meeting. I don't really know how much new information there is. I do have some interesting news. So I think last meeting I mentioned that Maine Housing has a contract with the Genesis Fund to kickstart a new program to help developers reach out to interested communities and get this done. The Genesis Fund is doing some webinars and in-person meetings between now and March. And Waldoboro will be their Midcoast location for this discussion on March 22nd, I believe, at 1 p.m. So you could still, and I can send out a calendar list for the other meetings they have in case there's interest to attend one of their other meetings, but it's probably going to be covering the same information. But if you're interested in attending in person and want to see it live, it'll be right here at the town office.
So would that be for the benefit of contractors, Max?
I'd say it's going to be the benefit. I would say it's beneficial to both towns as well as the contractors and developers, because sometimes the developers will have a lot of great projects they want to put together, but they just don't know a community that has some interesting land, and it's not as if we advertise every parcel that's available and could be developed in town. So it's just a matter, and it could also be something where the town may have an idea, but we can't move forward unless we have a developer who's ready to do a project. And then it's just a slow process to actually get something done.
Yeah, just as a reminder, the reason this
1 p.m.
seemed important to us last month was that there was a discussion that Jen brought up about businesses that couldn't attract employees simply because they couldn't get housing. And so the idea behind it is if we could provide housing, then that would lend itself to allowing businesses to flourish just by the fact they get employees.
Well, and I think this could also be a beneficial meeting for some of those larger businesses as well that are in the area. And I'll probably be reaching out to them as well if they're interested in sitting in. Because I think over in Thomaston, Lyman Morris is funding their own housing projects just because they can't wait for some more housing to pop up on the market. So there might be a very similar method that could happen in Lincoln County as well. But again, it's just a matter of getting everyone in the right room.
Yep. All right, good.
1 p.m., I believe March 22nd, the Wednesday for that week.
And who's going to be there again, Max?
What?
Who will attend?
I believe it is John Egan from the Genesis Fund.
Okay.
And they're the contracted people from Maine Housing to execute this program.
Got it.
John
Do
Egan
you have any idea how the funding works?
I do not. What?
John Egan used to be with CEI.
Well, let me double check. Make sure I got the right name. He might have just moved on to it.
Yeah, he might have. I wouldn't be, okay.
But John Egan Genesis Fund. Yep.
Hey, Max, do they have a name program?
You asked me that as I closed my email.
Ah, sorry.
Let me quickly check. For now, it's just called the Housing Technical Assistance Presentations. And these workshops are for municipalities working to attract projects to their communities and for community groups that are interested in supporting development in housing. So it's not really a grant program as much as it is not really a grant program, though this would help developers and towns also know some grant funding that is available to access it. Like the Community Development Block Grant has the Housing Assistance Program for up to $500,000 that can go towards housing, specifically for low to moderate income housing or workforce housing. So,
Are they doing any discussion on tax reform, like property tax reform, the major bulk of expenses? Is there anything at the state level where they would be starting that kind of discussion? Because 75 to 78% of our budget goes to the school on the property tax. There's got to be another way to fund stuff without burdening, because that's like you can buy the property, but that's half the cost of usually rent because they have to pay all those taxes for property too. There's other ways besides, when they say they do affordable housing, it's a very narrow band of the population that they actually help. You have to be within those federal poverty level limits. So when they say they're going to do affordable, there's only a certain band of people that qualify. It's not going to help the young college graduate who's only going to get X amount of dollars.
well, they would be,
That's what I'm looking at. That's what I see. It's just, when you look at that, it's just that narrow band. It's about 11% of the US population.
so
Not to be difficult, but I'm thinking it'd be interesting to hear what they have to say. But if they're coming up with designs where they're saying they're making it affordable to this, this moderate and low income level, that doesn't really address, the rest of the population.
So yeah, if we can just step back from that, the grant that I mentioned, the Community Development Block Grant, that was just an example for one of the grants that are out there. Not all grants and not all funding sources are going to be for that and for affordable housing. As I said, this is just putting developers and interested municipalities together to try and help identify some sources for where these housing projects could go. They're not necessarily 100% affordable housing. There could be an interested developer who just wants to build, I don't know, 5 to 10 units in town and say they're market rate. We just need to find a plot of land we can put it on. And from there, it's just a matter of, okay, how can we get it there? So it's not all necessarily affordable housing or the federal definition. I just want to clear that up. This is just trying to get developers to find interested communities. That's it.
But the Genesis Fund, according to their website, does focus purely on affordable housing projects. That's what they do.
Genesis Fund does, but I'm not sure that their contract with Maine State Housing is for affordable housing.
Ah.
But that's what the workshop hopefully would address.
Can I bring something up?
Yes, Jen.
Have you guys seen in the last 2 weeks the articles in the Bangor Daily News and other places, Maine Monitor, places like that, that the most recent study in the state for median home prices versus median wage, and that 16 counties in the state of Maine, the person who makes the median wage is unable to qualify for a mortgage for a median home price. And the median home prices are somewhere, I don't have the exact number, but it's somewhere around $330-something thousand. So I just want to point out, when we're throwing these words around, affordable, moderate, low, blah, 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 all that stuff, basically, to me, $330-something thousand as a median home price are way over what somebody can make and afford on a normal salary in the state of Maine.
I agree with you, Jen.
Think about it in that context. That's why it's a crisis. That's why.
So, yeah, as I say, the developer and the towns would just have to talk about a lot of this stuff themselves. I'm just saying this is what the program is, and we'll have the Mid-Coast discussion here in Waldeboro in March. I think there's a few others between now and then, but those are going through all different parts of the state, up all the way in the county, out west, I think almost on the New Hampshire border as well. It's all over. They wanted to reach every corner of the state, and that's pretty much it for that update.
And Max, part of it is that I don't think at this point we want to get hung up on, is it affordable housing? Is it
Right?
Is it rent assisted housing? Is it, now we're way too early in the process to even think about that. My view is, if I can get 10 houses built and get 10 families moved in to Waldeboro, that's a win. And I don't know if that's low housing or high housing prices or whatever, but if we can get additional housing, get families to move in, that's a win.
That's a good mindset to have this, I'd say. The other item that was brought up last time was about zoning and looking at some ways of cutting or removing some regulations and standards, at least on the zoning. I think I did mention this at the last meeting, but single family and multifamily housing are allowed in almost all of Waldeboro except the industrial zone. And with LD 2003, I'm waiting for state guidelines on how that will impact our ordinance. But so far, I think we don't even have that much to change. I think because we already allow accessory apartments in all of Waldeboro, and except the industrial area. And the growth cap area in town is the ones that's going to be on sewer and water. So unless there's an undeveloped parcel that's on sewer and water in Waldeboro, there's really not going to be that many units placed on it, maybe up to 3 units at most. But I'm not sure how, every town doesn't know how they're going to be impacted by that by July 1st of this year. And if the state's going to change that rule anyways.
Is that the LD 2003 you're talking about?
Yeah, that's your favorite statute, Bob.
So I'd name it Max, that's all.
Yeah. So that's all I really had for housing, unless there was anyone else who had some thoughts on it. Okay. In that case, move on to new business. Very quickly, solar at the transfer station. So there's two items for this. One is that if you've been to the transfer station ever since 2018, you will have seen a solar array. Julie, along with her budget committee and some select individuals, are looking at the potential to maybe buy these solar panels when they hit the 7th year, which I think is next
In 2024.
2024.
Yeah.
So right now, the group is just looking at the potential savings and seeing if it would be worth to get it, especially with the electric prices going up. And at the same time, there is another area on the transfer station that is capped and would be able to also have a solar farm on it. Nothing can really be built on it, and it's at the transfer station, so we're not taking out any prime real estate. So the thought was maybe doing another solar farm there. And because the town's already at capacity with having all their electricity from the existing solar farm, what would we put on the new solar farm is the question if we want to do another power purchase agreement. And I think some of the suggestions that have come up has been nonprofits like the library. But I didn't know if Julie and I wanted to check with the EDC to see if there were any thoughts on that. It would probably be another 110 kilowatts, probably, because it's roughly the same size, I think, maybe a bit bigger. So it's not like we can power the whole town. Jan, were you going to say something?
No, I was just went, sorry, I should have been on mute.
That's all right.
Thinking out loud.
So we would probably follow the same procedure where we get an RFP, we'll send it out and see what interest we get. But does anyone have any thoughts on this?
So walk me through that. So the reason the first solar array made so much sense is because it would offset power usage by the town.
Mhm.
And we actually were able to kind of reduce the penalty that we were being charged by Central Maine Power for our power purchase. And so there was a lot of really, really good reasons to put that array in.
Mhm.
So the second, if we put a new array in, we don't get those benefits. Is that right?
We don't, but if it's being installed for free and it's going to be through a power purchase agreement, then it may not be the town of Waldoboro, the town offices at least, but I think the water station that's technically owned by someone else, by the water district, they could be on it. And then the library could be on it and a bunch of other nonprofit groups, or it doesn't even have to be nonprofit. It could just be some interested businesses that want to be on it and buy into it.
What about the school?
I've reached out to the school and they have not given me a definitive answer. They said it sounds like a nice project, but they did not want to commit because they may put solar panels on their own roofs.
Oh, well, fair.
So how, let's say we said, the industrial park, for example, might be a good, because there's probably a lot of power usage in that area. How would it benefit them and how could it benefit the town? I mean, would they have to invest in the solar array?
It would depend on how, well, and this is again why I wanted to bring it up to the EDC on how you would want to structure this. Because it could be leased out. We could allow another solar farm to be out there and whoever's going to buy into it could give us a nice little few $100s just as a thank you for it. But if it's nonprofits, we could choose to just say, we're not paying anything and they can just use the power from there for a reduced rate.
Could we let anybody in the town who buys in get a reduced rate?
that's what the power purchase agreement would be. I mean, Bob, you were involved in the first one, so I don't know if I'm messing up how it's done.
Well, the first one is interesting because a couple of things have come to light. When they spec'd the size of the unit on the transfer station, and I don't know who spec'd it, and what information they used to spec it. Usually you look at your electric bill and you look at your usage and you spec an array that is slightly under what your documented usage is. Well, this particular array was spec'd such that they installed more than the town has been using. So I don't know how that number was arrived at. I mean, it was spec'd for 110
Kilowatts.
kW based on a usage of 133,000 kilowatt hours a year. And we haven't, if we go back and look at our usage and the production, we haven't hit that number. We come close, but we haven't hit it. So the town has been paying for what the arrays produce, irrespective of how much the town uses. So the town has paid more for the production than it would have paid if it had, if the solar array had been spec'd more appropriately. The happy side of this is that the fixed price of that array for purchase is $164,000 roughly.
Right.
If we were to duplicate that effort today, it would cost more than double that to get it installed. So if we buy it at today's electricity rates, the payback is like 3 to 5 years. It's a very, very good deal for the town, provided that the array itself is in good shape. So I think the town is going to have somebody look at it and determine that it is in fact in good shape and is worth spending the money for.
Bob, if I remember right, we were told the array had a 25-year life.
Well, they're now saying they last 40 years.
Yeah.
And you lose 80% or 20% of the efficiency over that period of time. And if electric rates continue to go up, it's still going to be economical for us to own it.
Absolutely.
It's a very good deal. But in terms of another array, I mean, I don't know about you, but I've had people walk up and ask me, are we going to build another array? Can I invest in that?
Yeah.
We've got a transfer station with some empty space that's not being used. It makes sense to use that to some economic benefit to the town. Maybe a group of investors get together, local town investors, and they put in an array and pay the town a lease. A lease rental fee for the land,
Right.
you know? Maybe the nonprofits get it on. Some nonprofits would probably be willing to become investors in this thing. So I don't know that there's a specific formula to follow. I think we need to figure out who's interested and what their needs are and see if that's something that we can work with to put a project together.
I see Jen's hands up.
Yeah, remember, Bob, you were telling us before that CMP told us that we couldn't build any more solar facilities in town and or maybe even expand businesses who have high use of electricity because of something in
Substations.
The substations at
Yeah.
Cassie.
substation.
Substation issue.
Has that changed or is this going to impact that?
I think that would be based on the solar developer we'd have to talk to about doing this.
Yeah, I mean, if we did 110 kilowatts, I don't know whether that would have whether that would be above what the substation can handle or not. I just don't know. We have to find out.
Do we know what developer we're working with?
We do not. We're
I guess developer is the wrong term. I'm more interested in the company
Installer.
that's good. Yeah,
solar.
the installer. Yeah.
I mean, Revision probably would put something in.
Mhm.
Sundog probably wouldn't. Then
There's one
it's
down-
just a
there's
matter
one
of
down in
finding someone.
Freeport, they mentioned.
I think he did. Yeah. I don't know. We
Yeah.
could talk about every single solar developer. We'd see who's interested. That's
Okay.
pretty much it. So I guess for the EDC, I could certainly, I don't know. I guess I'll hold off on an RFP, but is the idea maybe focusing on profits, or as Bob suggested, maybe more on an investor term? Because actually the investor idea might be better. Get an idea of how much it would cost to install it all, and then rather than doing the power purchase agreement, they could just buy it outright.
Yep.
I like that idea a lot better, especially with the direct impact on people's power bill. Like,
Mhm.
So the advantage of that obviously is that the town gets money in a lease arrangement for land that's otherwise just sitting there vacant.
Exactly.
Right.
yeah, there's worse things to do than put a solar panel on something.
Yeah.
I think that's something worth pursuing, that idea, that concept.
All right.
Maybe it's a non-binding ballot question at some point. Or maybe it's a survey.
Don't. I have 2 months to get a lot of things done, Bob. Don't push it.
November.
November is okay. That's fine. I can live with November.
Fighting words with word survey.
Don't want to get Max pissed off.
No, let's not.
Max, when do we have to make the decision on purchasing the existing one?
Well, Bob, you said
2024.
yeah. So they're looking at it now, and then I guess it's a matter of seeing if there's any last minute changes between now and I'd guess maybe January of next year.
If it's in good shape, I'd ask him if we can buy it today.
Oh, yeah, if
That's
it's all in working
100%.
order.
Go earlier.
No, it's, correct me if I'm wrong, 'cause I hear bits and pieces, but it seems like the vendor that installed that system hasn't been super responsive. Is that at all accurate?
That's correct.
So we'll need someone else to go look at the quality of the array and all that.
Well, and you would want a third party inspector anyways. So
I'm not really concerned. I'm hyper interested in the solar stuff. I think it's
Me
neat.
too.
are there any other comments on the solar at the transfer station?
No, just one really quick one. The proof's in the pudding with solar. So if the output's the output, that's kind of the number one indicator that it's working the way it's supposed to.
All right. Any final thoughts for solar?
Well,
Hearing
how
none?
would you find out? Where would you go to look to find out how it costs, like the different options? Like, if you see these advertisements, would you like to purchase into a solar thing? How much does it cost to purchase in and stuff? Is that something you'd have to call the vendor about, the guy who's selling, like the solar company? Like, there's 3 or 4 that come up regularly, just call them, or can you look, is there something on the state? Because I don't know exactly how those work.
Are you asking about the third party to look at the ones that are already at the solar farm for us to purchase and to say if they're in good
No. If I was just thinking, if we have to I don't know what this decision does. I would like to understand how a solar array, not how it works, but how the costs, it's like, how do you arrange for it and what are the benefits versus the costs? That's what I was thinking for, so I'd have a better idea for a better decision or thought process, So leasing versus installing, because there's the issue, like they never told you if you get the solar array on your home, what it does to your property taxes, because it increases the value of the home and you're paying huge property tax hikes. And it's more than what it saves you in electricity costs.
I can answer that, son. You have a 20 kilowatt array on my property, and the answer is that particular thing didn't affect me. There were forms that were filled out to make an exception for that added value. So if I went to sell my house, the value would be increased, but my property tax increase, it went up, but the solar had nothing to do with it. And I don't have 9 panels. If you drive by my house up on Magtown, I've made 34 megawatt hours this last year. Like, it's not a small array.
Okay, is it attached to your house or beside the house?
I did a ground mounted commercial grade array. That way, if it breaks, I can go fix it with a wrench.
Okay, I don't know what a ground mountain array is, but
So a
I'm just
ground
trying to
mounted,
picture.
Down on the
they
roof.
put metal poles in the ground.
Right.
They built a grid and they mounted the panels right to it. So I wouldn't have to, my house is a 2-story house. So I wouldn't have to climb to
Mhm.
go replace a cracked panel or work on a micro inverter or whatever. It's just all right there.
Okay,
It's like a
okay, yeah,
small-
all right. Yeah, my neighbor has something down the road. They're on the corner and they have a big thing on one side of their yard. It's not attached to the house, but it's like, looks like 3 or 4 panels and are metal, looks like a stadium or a scaffolding.
Yeah, it's real. So if you're ever coming by the house, hit me on Facebook or give me a ring and I'll be happy to show you what I got if you're ever curious.
Okay, yep.
All right. Any other final thoughts on solar? Hearing none. Next was going to be the aquaculture discussion, but we talked about that during town updates. I assume there's nothing else to touch on that? Okay. Next, Jen, you had the WBA.
I just wanted to let you guys know that we're in the process of revitalizing the board. Jessica Pooley is assisting. She helped to recruit 3 other business owners in town. We have technically a quorum. We still have seats on the board available if there are other business owners who would like to participate. It is going to take work to pull the whole thing together, but we are having meetings which are more frequent, as you can imagine. And we've broken down, we've done the initial work of breaking down the tasks into smaller pieces. So we're having smaller meetings, subcommittee type meetings. And we're planning to have a gathering at the end of April, which we will communicate with everybody. We'll start to, well, we could use some more people, but anyway, we have at least a quorum, so we're able to make decisions and take votes. And that was the most important part. So I just wanted to let you know.
That's really good news, Jen.
Congratulations for getting that back up.
Well, I give a lot of credit to Jessica Pooley because she was able to convince some actually pretty good people to participate, which is really nice. So we're making progress.
Fantastic to hear.
Yeah.
Well, were there any other comments or questions on that? Last item is the comments from the committee, in case anyone had any final thoughts or ideas or topics of discussion for the next meeting.
I just want to throw one thing out there. Is it possible to do some kind of focus group on the housing thing? Some other way.
Can somebody put a microphone near?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, I was talking, Jen, about the housing. Is there some way to do a focus group or subcommittee, something that can specifically be looking at the housing issue in town?
I think that there's going to be work on that coming up in the future once the county-wide report that is being that the consultants will be releasing or probably in a month or so. I think that it'll be the data in there will be municipal based as well as county based. So there'll be information that each municipality will be able to use to begin I guess, base data to begin a discussion and start to move towards whatever they might be interested in. That's just my gut feeling. We're having a Lincoln County Regional Planning Commission meeting next week. So we'll have an update by then, I think.
Okay.
And by that, well, it would be our April EDC meeting, but as I say, next month we'll also have the workshop with the Genesis Fund as well. So there will be a lot coming in March, but I certainly don't mind discussing these things outside of these meetings as well. If you ever have questions or want to bounce some ideas off me, my office is always open.
Yeah, okay.
In that case, if there's no other questions or comments, is there a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
Second, no discussion. Does anyone want to keep going any longer? I see Jen's hand is up. Just kidding.
Very funny.
All right.
Mine is too.
All right. With that, I take it the meeting's over. Good night, everyone.